Hey guys, Lizardlea here for 4 Heavenly Beasts, the Heaven and Earth Design Day 12. The tiger is almost done. I think within the next couple of days I'll finish page 2, so that's exciting. I really just want to go stitch, so that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay, we are recording.
We are recording.
What's the next one?
We talked about One Punch Man last, so the next one is Death Note.
Okay, so I started the manga and I was absolutely loving it. I was in high school, I was a freshman. And then we moved to Japan. And I was like, yes, this is going to be perfect. You know, like, I'm going to be in the country where this is being written. And then every single thing I looked through online, it was not available in my country. You know, like, so I couldn't get the translated ones. I could get the Japanese ones, but at that time I couldn't read any Japanese. So I never finished it. I want to one day, but that day has not come.
Okay, so first the quick summary.
I just had to, whine.
Sort of mastermind, brilliant child, kid, person, high schooler, meets what they call he finds a notebook. And for those, the 8 of you, well, I guess probably more on your channel, who don't know Death Note, when he writes a name in the notebook, that person will die, how he writes in the books.
And if he doesn't write anything, they die of a heart attack.
Yes.
I remember that.
And it turns out this is the book of a
Shinigami
or death god. And there's apparently a couple of them, and it sort of goes from there where this kid goes with it, because he starts kind of in many ways doing what I think a lot of people would do, which is like, oh, I'm going to fix all the world's problems, I'm going to kill off lots of people. And
this guy's holding up a bank and has 20 hostages. Dead.
Yeah. And so then on top of that, there's another kid who's this super brilliant detective who's trying to track him and find him because, you're going outside the law.
Is Elle a kid?
Yeah, he's young, I think. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be like Kira's age is the whole point.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I could be wrong. I
don't know. I mean, it's been a decade. No, it's been 14 years since I read it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I never finished it.
So yeah, that's the non-spoiler. It's very detective-y, secret plotty, go outside the lines, mastermindy stuff. And it's good for the first half, and that's as much as I'll say without spoiling things. Do you want me to not spoil things? Because you might want to finish
I know a lot about it. I mean, I will say, of the things that I recall, one of my favorite things was very early on. It's how you really start to figure out how incredibly intelligent Elle is, and Elle is the detective. So he has a broadcast going out every half an hour. I mean, the public doesn't know this. They think it's all happening at the same time. So, this small district is seeing this message where it's this guy claiming I think it's a guy who's claiming he is a prisoner.
No, he's claiming
he's claiming he's Elle, but he actually is a prisoner or something like that. And they put his name on the screen, and so after half an hour, if nothing has happened, they broadcast it in a different precinct. And eventually it gets to... What the heck is the main kid's name with the notebook? I don't remember his name. Kira. It gets to Kira's district. And that's when suddenly the guy dies in the middle of the broadcast. Because they gave his real name. So then Elle comes out and he's like, oh, I know where you live now. Because this was only broadcast in this specific area. So I know you live here. And it was just that was actually incredibly intelligent. He thought through that multiple ways. So I thought that was incredibly interesting because I had not considered that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the thing is it's very clever, and it's also very over the top dramatic. There's many famous scenes of him just being kind of ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Up until I would say about halfway through. So the big thing they do is they keep going back and forth with this giant mind game between Elle and Kira, and they do a really good job of sort of setting up ridiculous, but given the circumstances, I'll buy that scenarios. Okay, no one in real life would have done this, but I will believe that this character in this situation could have pulled this off. It does an okay job of keeping that suspension of disbelief, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, no, his name is Light Yagami.
Oh,
it's not Kira.
Kira's the name he tells people to call him.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, I swear that was wrong.
I hope.
I believe you. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, Kira investigation team.
Yeah, because they're hunting Kira. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not completely stupid. So, yeah, Light. So Light versus L. Anyways, one of the things you find out, like a lot of it is finding out the powers of the book because he doesn't know the powers. He only gets told some of the rules, and this Shinigami is kind of messing with him because while he looks hideously evil, he's basically kind of just bored. All these death gods exist, and when they write your name in the book, if they write a name in the book, they get the years remaining to that person. So if you had 50 years to live and he kills you at 20, he gets the 50 years added to his lifespan. And apparently these gods get so bored they forget to write names in the book and just vanish because that's how boring life is. So he drops his book on the earth every now and then and causes chaos because he finds it exciting. So Light is trying to figure out the rules, messing with them, and one of the big ones is as Liz mentioned, if you don't write a cause of death, they die in 30 minutes of a heart attack.
30 minutes or 30 seconds?
30 minutes. It's got a big time delay, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's played very importantly because, like, in the early on, he almost only uses that because he doesn't want people to know he can do more than that, which is already, like, 4 steps farther than I probably would have thought. Like, no, so-and-so hit by train.
Right, like, he chokes to death.
But they live in sub-Saharan Africa, hit by train. Like, or in the middle of Sahara. Like, I want to see what this can do. Run over by battleship in Kansas, you know?
Like, I wouldn't want to wait 30 minutes, especially if there's a bank robbery going on. It's like, yeah, they could all be dead in 30 minutes.
Well,
so.
That's also, again, not his concern.
Oh, I know. But that's something I would be concerned about.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, this dude is, gonna kill all these people. We have the option to just kill him, or give him the option to possibly let them all survive and come out of this unscathed. I don't know if I'm really comfortable with that. Like, if an innocent person dies, I'm gonna feel like I could have changed that, and it's on me now. And I know that's not right, but...
And they do
that's
play
the
with
moral
all this.
dilemma.
Like, Light is pretty Machiavellian, but so is L. But they do definitely touch on all of these ethical issues. Like, he is a fairly normal, if arrogant and bright, high schooler when he starts, like standard anime trope. But he's not, like, a sociopath or anything. But he's definitely basically the villain. They still kind of toe the line of, like, well, I can understand why people would like what he's doing, and I can understand why the police would want to catch him, and I can maybe, in some way, understand why he would then try to kill the police, because he sees himself as doing something that no one else can do, and it's right.
Yeah, so if they take him out, nobody's going to take
it's still not played like he's a good guy, but it doesn't just straight up, like, cackling villain him. So, if any of this sounds interesting, once again, stop and go watch/read the first half of it, because I'm about to get to the big spoiler, which I think is a cool moment, and then explain how that ruined everything shortly thereafter. So, fast forward if you're remotely interested, 1, 2, 3, whatever. So, they screw it all up because they do a pretty good arc. It's getting a little ridiculous, but they have all these cool plot points, and L and Light are going back and forth. And finally, Light outsmarts L, because the whole thing is he needs your real name, and he needs to know what you look like. So he is actually teamed up with L by forgetting what he knows, because when you use the Death Note, you lose all your memories of it. And all this crazy Machiavellian, completely insane planning leads up to him outsmarting L, and he kills him. And it's like, wow, that was really good. I did not see that coming. That's a great payoff. Like, you've built up this whole world, you've built up this thing, and you have the guts to double down and actually kill off a really creative character in a way that makes it feel kind of like earned and natural. Like, yeah, that's a real arc. And then they chicken out, and I'm sure this was always planned maybe, but like they completely undo all the seriousness of that because, whoops, there's 2 younger kids who are both like L, who he was secretly training, and now they fill in, and they're the exact same as L, just harder to believe because now it's even younger, even dumber, even more ridiculous.
Okay, yeah, that part I didn't know. I knew he died. I didn't know he was replaced by his 2, underlings.
Yeah.
That's so disappointing.
It completely undermines the brilliance of that moment. If they had wrapped up right there, or found a cool way to continue, or, there were a million ways they could have taken that story, and I sincerely believe that was absolutely one of the worst possible, because it just totally you're like, oh, so you didn't actually have the guts to kill this character, or think of a way to continue the plot from here, which is like, wow, how are they going to do this? It's, oh, you made too many L's, who are, again, even harder to swallow, because it's like, great, now their middle schoolers are even, elementary or something. It's so ridiculous. And it's such a kick in the teeth to what is otherwise a really good moment for a manga. So, or anime. Either way, I literally dropped it there. I've kind of like skimmed through the rest of it, like watched the important scenes, blah, 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 blah. I know a lot of people straight dropped it there. I know a couple who stuck with it and were like, wow, that wasn't worth it. But the other big, big spoiler is at the end they do kill Kira. Which, cool. And like, might have even been good if you'd done that earlier, but then you needed L to win. And it's like, God. Especially given how they establish, like, after he kills L, it's like, oh, people start worshiping him, and like there's this whole underground movement, blah, 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 blah. They had all the right pieces to make something really great, and instead they, like, I'm sure it may not have aged perfectly well because it was so unique, and now it'll be like, wow, this is hokey and over the top in some ways, but it would still probably be a much bigger classic and probably way higher on this list had they not completely botched the second half of the season, or the show. So, yeah, that's the big Death Note thing. In fact, that's what Robert told me, you said, to try and get me to date you, is that, I asked her about Death Note, and she said, what do you mean there's no second season? Which is like what I always tell him.
That's a lie.
I know, because you've never seen it, but he was...
Oh my gosh, did he say that just to get you to like me?
Yes. Or he had no memory. Like, or you were talking about anime, and he's like, close enough, that sounds like something she said.
Either that, or he's my good wingman.
Yes, so good on him.
Okay, so the creepy goth girl, whatever happened with her? Anything important?
The one that's like trying to date him, right?
Yeah.
So her arc is they introduce this woman at some point who is stupid levels of in love with Kira, like irrationally so. And she exists because she's also got a death god who's helping her.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because the death god is in love with her.
What the heck? Oh my gosh.
It works okay. And the reason she exists is because the death god, Ryuk, the one that's helping Kira, offers him a deal at certain times. Like, hey, I'll give you certain death god powers. Like, for example, I'll give you death god eyes, which will let you see how many years a person has left. Which is important for reasons I cannot exactly recall, but it's a big deal. And the only deal is he's going to take half of your remaining lifespan, and you don't know how much that is.
Oh, no. Nope.
So, Kira says, nah, I'm smart enough. But this girl either made that deal, or the death god gave it to her for free or something because he loves her, or some weird thing like that. So the whole point is, Kira is absolutely 120% manipulating this girl because she's got a death god, and she'll take all the stupid risks for him. And that actually is kind of an interesting concept, because if I recall correctly, at no time in any way, shape, or form do they, unlike the live-action movie, I'll get on that, imply that he has any feeling for her, other than, wow, you're useful. Now, he's not necessarily completely insane about it, like he doesn't...
Yeah, but he doesn't seem like he actually, like, returns her feelings.
Well, God, no, but, like, he definitely doesn't, like, feel for her. He doesn't, like, necessarily revel in manipulating her. It's just like, yep, this will be useful.
Yeah.
Very cold. So, yeah, so she eventually dies, I'm 99% sure. Maybe at Kira's hand, even. Because, like, the death god finally gets through to her that, like, hey, this guy's dangerous, you need to write his name in your death note so you can kill him.
Maybe.
And so he takes her out first. I recall it being an interesting twist, but, like, by that point I'm pretty sure they'd already killed Elle, so everything else was off the rails and anything goes. Since I brought it up, they made a live action... Yeah, with Willem Dafoe. And it's kind of a shame, because of all the live action junk I've watched, you can tell that at some point someone who cared was involved with the script.
Unlike the Full Metal Alchemist live action movie, don't see that. Continue.
Yes, dear.
It made me cry.
I am aware of this. I was there. So...
It made me suffer.
Yes. The actor who plays Elle, I think, really tries and does a good job. I cannot remember his name, but they're like, ooh, he's black, but, like, I don't care. He knocked it out of the park. But there's, like, parts where you're like, oh, some writer kind of got what this was about. But then it feels like some producer got their hands on it and was like, nobody will watch this. You need to put in a romance and a this and a that, and then it just kind of doesn't go anywhere. Although my friend brought up a really good point, which is Willem Dafoe plays the death god Ryuk, and the movie is 100% better if you just pretend that instead of sitting there in his makeup and his costume looking like a menacing death god, it's just Willem Dafoe looking like Willem Dafoe, saying all these lines and doing all these things. And I have to agree, it does improve the movie. So,
what if he was the Green Goblin?
Yeah, so...
That would be great too, right?
Yeah. So that is pretty much everything I can say about Death Note, I think, other than it was kind of one of the first animes in a while, like around that time. Let's see, 2006. Yeah, I was just going into college, so that was when I was starting to like really get into anime, like acquiring it through other means rather than just Adult Swim, and was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So it was really sad when they jumped off a cliff with it.
Yeah, I never finished the manga. I did not get into the anime because all of the anime I could see in Japan was in Japanese, did not have subtitles, or it was like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh.
Gotta catch 'em all.
Pokemon. I love Pokemon, don't get me wrong. Like, I was very tempted when I saw that the old original Pokemon episodes were on Netflix recently. But I'm watching Fate right now, so... Okay, what's next?
Okay, so the next two I'm going to quickly mention just because I've heard about them. Ping Pong, the animation. It's an anime about ping pong. It's number 43 in my anime list, just for reference, which you would not expect of like a sports anime ping pong thing if you're not into anime, but I hear they're good. I've never tried any sports anime because I just can't, but I just don't want to.
I started the manga for, oh my gosh, what was it called? The baseball one.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
They made it a live action movie from it. It was amazing. I loved it.
Okay.
They were all really good looking. But no, it was actually really faithful to the manga. In my memory, it was at least. So I was happy about that. Let's see, so that was the baseball one. Oh, I swear I'd read another one. Does Hikaru no Go count? It's a Go. Well, it's
yeah, no, that counts.
It counts? Okay.
Yeah.
I read a lot of Hikaru no Go because it was in Shonen Jump for a while. And so, I really enjoyed it. I've heard there's an anime adaptation. I want to see it because I really liked that manga. The idea of, like, this ghost helping him learn to play Go was really cool to me.
I agree.
Okay, sorry. So, yeah, those are my sporty ones that I'll be able to talk about if they come up.
Yes, and then the one after that is Bakuman, which, again, I've heard, I think that's it's the third season, where they're trying to make a anime or a manga, so it's an anime about making anime. And I hear it's very popular because it does a very good job of kind of carrying that across and does some cool things. Again, I've never tried it. I'm always hit or miss on the more realistic animes just because, while they can have great stories and stuff, I kind of gravitate towards things that are really, in my opinion, taking advantage of the medium. And I love me some... I like me fantasy, action, sci-fi stuff, and anime can do really cool stuff with that.
Oh, yeah.
That you can't get in live action usually, at least not without $1 trillion budget. So... nonetheless, I hear great things about it. So, the next one is Fate Zero.
Oh!
The second season.
Okay, but the anime, this one actually is kind of in order. This one is a sequel to the first season. It's a direct sequel.
It's the second half of Fate Zero. So it's not what you're watching with Rin.
It's what?
It's not with Rin. It's pre-Rin.
This is the second season the second...
Ryder. It's with Ryder.
I love Ryder.
Yes,
okay, so we can, whatever. We're going to talk about both seasons.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Well, you do your...
Summary.
You're better at those.
Oh boy, Fate. Go look up Giguk and watch his video. No,
Don't do that.
It's a good...
It was funny, but like...
Yeah,
it's not going to give you a summary of the show at all.
It's not going to be anything more clear.
You're going to get some gross stuff, too.
Yeah, so short version, cards up front, Fate was based on a game, a visual novel that had, like, sexy stuff in it. But it actually somehow has a good story outside of that. And you can just rip all that out and be left with an actually really great story. Or at least as far as, like, fantasy stuff goes. And so that's what they did. Was like, wow, this is really, really popular, and if we rip all this stuff out, it's way easier to, like, show this to everybody. So, cool. So what happened was they made one anime, because the idea in the story is you go through 3 different paths, which, it being a sort of dating thing / fantasy thing, means that the character meets and dates
Different girls, yes.
3 different girls, blah,
this
blah, blah.
has nothing to do with the anime.
We're getting there. It's important. They made an anime eons ago, different studio for the first path, and it was terrible. And then out of nowhere, they made Fate Zero, which is the one we're about to talk about.
Which is good.
And it's very good, and it had a ridiculous budget, and it's incredibly high quality. And so just from a coolness standpoint, it's very neat.
Yeah, visually, it's a beautiful movie.
Yeah, so
beautiful
getting
show.
to the plot, the idea is that every 60 years in Fuyuki, Japan, the city? Fuyuki, yeah.
Is it Fuyuki?
Yeah, it's Fuyuki.
Yeah.
They have this secret war where all these mages come, 3 families who live there, and then other mages get selected. And they summon heroic servants from the past, basically specters of them, kind of. And they fight to the death.
In order to win the Holy Grail.
In order to win the Holy Grail, yes. And so the background, that's basically the background. And Fate Zero is technically a prequel to the more popular stuff, but in many ways is actually kind of better because it can take its setting more seriously, I think. Because the idea is that, again, this is a legit no-holds-barred, secret battle-to-the-death thing with these ridiculously powerful people they've summoned. And the mages themselves are horrifically dangerous, and nasty individuals with horribly messed up stuff. This can be a very dark and gruesome show, so, warning. And so, Fate, the normal Fate, of course, the main character is a high school student, as is, most of the females. And Fate Zero, I feel, fits so much better because they're all frickin' adults, and it makes more sense that this would be a bunch of adults trying to murder each other, except there's one exception, rather than a bunch of high school students, as is traditional to anime. The main famous twist is that right at the beginning, each person gets a different class of servant. There's Saber, Lancer, blah, 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 blah. The Saber servant...
Writer's the most important, just so you know.
We'll get there. And they're all famous, and they're never Japanese folklore heroes, because that was just some rule the writer imposed on himself. But they have King Arthur as the Saber in almost every season. And King Arthur, whoops, history got it wrong, it was a she.
Arturia.
Yes. Well, rather, she pretended to be a guy, is basically what they straight up say. Not that she looks anything like one, but...
Yeah, not at all.
Well, I believe it's supposed to be implied that in the past, she looked more like a guy in the era, and now she doesn't try because she's a heroic spirit. But yeah, it's total... There is a whole world of anime BS behind this one, so if you're not up for that...
The idea is incredibly interesting.
Yes.
The way they handled it made it uninteresting. Saber, as Arturia Pendragon, is probably my least favorite character on the show. She isn't interesting. It's always oh, I'm a knight. I want to go back and save my country. I want to save England. And it's just...
Yeah.
Honor, and it's just not interesting at all.
So, I will say in defense...
To me.
Yeah, no, she's not wrong, but to be fair... Since each of these seasons / routes / whatever, again, this is stupid complicated, is supposed to have a main character that it's focusing on. So Fate Zero is focusing on 2 characters who become way important later, a priest and the father, the eventual adoptive father of the main character in the sequel. And then in the sequel, it's the second path, again, complicated, stupid stuff, and it's focusing on that character and another girl. And in both of these, she's Saber is not supposed to be the main character, Arthur. And so she doesn't get all the character development she's supposed to get. A lot of her character development comes in the path that was already adapted and was terrible. Nobody likes it. It's a terrible adaptation. It's not very good. Would not recommend. It's not going to be on this list. So that's part of why she's more boring than she might otherwise be. But part of it is she's just not that interesting. She's supposed to be this I regret my decisions kind of king, and I didn't know how to lead, and blah, 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 and there's some really interesting stuff. So that's the whole giant, ridiculous, non-spoiler thing. Diving into spoilers, so one of the first things is knowing who the servants are and figuring it out is kind of one of the cool things about it, because the idea is that oh, wow, you summoned King Arthur. That must be someone who's really strong, and she is. But, they rival her in every season with a lot of cool people, and some you would not expect. So in Fate Zero, the big names, and again this is fairly large spoilers, are Alexander the Great, who is the writer.
He's my favorite character across everything that I've seen on Fate.
Yeah, he is really quite great.
He is the best.
Really well done.
He is amazing. And his master, Waver, is also a great character. Mm-hmm. They're just so much fun, you guys. Like, David sent me a meme the other day.
Yeah.
And he was like, this is every episode where Waver's like, Ryder, no! And Alexander the Great is like, Ryder, yes! He goes out and he does what he wants to do. Like, he's supposed to go out and kill the other servants so that Waver can win the Holy Grail War and win the Holy Grail.
And get his wish. That's the other thing.
You get one wish when you get the Holy Grail. And Ryder isn't good at that. Like, there are times he's not. I'm sorry.
Instructions unclear, did what I wanted.
There's a point where he sets up this just drinking session with two of the other servants. And he invited everybody, but only these other two showed up. And so they're like, oh, are we gonna fight? And he's like, no, we're gonna drink. Yeah. And you're just like, what? Iskandar, what's wrong with you?
And that is to kind of give why everyone likes these shows, or this show. That is one of the better scenes to kind of explain it, because not only does it have beautiful and super well done action scenes, just really incredible, over the top, wow, that's amazing stuff. It does actually kind of hold its own with its dialogue. Now, I've heard it accused of being the writers think they're smarter than they are. Maybe, maybe not, depends on your point of view, but that whole drinking thing
I loved it.
Is between him, Saber, and the archer for the tournament, who is Gilgamesh.
Uh-huh.
And so they're all talking about what it means to be a king. How do you rule? And it's actually a really interesting conversation, because it tells you a lot about the characters, and it's believable, that they would each believe this, and they all kind of have believable reactions to the other ones as well, not just oh, well, you're an idiot. Oh, that's an interesting way to look at kingship. Or, in their case, wow, Saber, you were bad at this, weren't you?
Yeah, so they each have noble phantasms. We're kind of jumping around, but it's kind of important. We can get into it with each individual character. For Ryder, for instance, his noble phantasm is he creates this, reality bubble. It's gigantic, by the way.
Marbles hurt me.
Marble, okay. Yeah, reality marble, that's what it's called, sorry. That makes it sound small. I mean, bubbles
it's giant.
It's gigantic. And so he can teleport himself and his enemy and other people around into a different reality, is what it looks like. And he's on a horse, and then you see behind him, he just has an army of people, a literal army of people. And so he will just attack you full on with himself and hundreds of knights and other people
Probably
with him.
Thousands, yeah.
So many. It's hard to quantify. You don't even get to see how big the reality marble actually is.
Yeah.
I mean, Alexander the Great had a gigantic army, so
yeah, it's literally him.
It stands to reason that it's everyone from his first army to his last army.
Yeah.
And he treasures every single one of them. He thinks everyone under his rule is important. He thinks they're all equally as important. And he thinks without them, he would not be a king. He wouldn't be a good king, at least. And then you have Arturia, she's like, well, no, a king must stand alone. A king has to be above the rest. He has to go and put himself out there. And Alexander's like, what is wrong with you? No, you're wrong. It's part of the conversation.
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay. You made it look like I was wrong, and I was like, I just watched this.
I mean, no, I mean, maybe some subtext stuff, but yeah, no, that's basically it, which is
They have different views on what being a king is.
Yeah, no, and I think the way I'd summarize it is Arthur thinks that you're supposed to suffer for your country, you stand alone, you shoulder the burden, whereas Alexander believes you're supposed to be great for your country. You need to show them how awesome you are, because they are going to live through your greatness, of you being king, and if you are great and wonderful, they will respect you and be happier and blah, 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 and they'll be willing to follow you into battle. You shouldn't be miserable and mopey and sad. Mm-hmm. You should be the greatest of them all because you are.
So he puts her down, and I love it.
Yeah.
and then Gilgamesh is also there. And he thinks they're both kind of stupid.
Oh, that's underselling it. Well, no, actually...
He actually kind of likes both of them at different points for different reasons.
Well, I'll go off on Gilgamesh for just a bit, because, you have to understand his background is that, he is a huge deal in this show. because
he's the original myth, is what they treat him as.
Yeah, he is, like, in case you don't know your history, Gilgamesh was supposed to be one of the first kings ever, and, like, they believe he was actually a person, and that, well, they don't actually believe he's a demigod, but they believe
he is a demigod.
In the show, I mean, in real life, they believe he existed.
Okay.
Yes,
gotcha,
and,
okay.
like, again, these are all based on actual people or myths, and so, yeah, he's supposed to be one of the oldest known stories is the Epic of Gilgamesh. So he is this incredibly ancient thing, and then for ridiculously powerful. His noble phantasm is he has everyone else's weaponry and noble phantasms because all treasure in the world is his. So his view of ruling is ruling through divinity. Like, I am king because only I can be king because I am half god, and you are not, therefore I am king. So whereas Alexander the Great thinks he is great and he should be great and he should show his people that he deserves it because he's great.
Of conquerors.
Yeah, and he's going to go out and conquer more people to be great. And Arthur thinks that you shoulder the burden to be great. Gilgamesh just is.
Yeah, he's kind of the king of kings.
Like, of course I'm king. If I deign to notice you, you should be happy because. Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting though, because even being that kind of arrogant, over the top archetype, they make this conversation interesting because he doesn't just snub them and go, wow, you guys suck. Well, maybe Arthur. But he has an actually interesting conversation on the merits of how Ryder sees everything, and I thought that was, like, really well handled because I would have just expected them to, do exactly what I said.
Other, yeah.
Well, again, especially Gilgamesh, I expected it was just going to be 15 minutes of him being like, I'm a god and you're just not people, bye. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But instead they did a good thing.
No, it's a really good conversation. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and then the other cool thing they do is you do learn a little just by extension, because, like, the other people in that war are the Lancer is, I had to look it up, Diramund Ua Duabani. It's Irish, I believe, and I am not good at that, but it's someone I had never heard of, and he's got a really cool, interesting story that I looked up after I watched, or when I started watching this, because I was like, oh, that's curious. And then, again, the other character who I really like just because of what they did, the caster.
Oh, man.
Is someone named Bluebeard who I was not aware of.
Oh, my gosh, this dude is terrifying.
So, first of all, he has, like, literal, because he even says, like, in the subtitles, they have him say, like, Cthulhu Thagen, or however you pronounce that if
Cthulhu.
You're a Lovecraft nerd, yeah. So he literally summons, like, tentacled monstrosities.
It's terrifying.
And it makes sense, because I didn't know this, but he supposedly was one of Joan of Arc's priests or strongest followers, heavily religious. And then when she died the way she died, supposedly, he lost his faith and believed there was no God and did horrific things throughout the rest of his life to prove that there was no God, because no God would allow him to live and get away with this. He's being so atrocious. And this is thus proof that there isn't one, because look at what I'm doing and nobody is stopping.
Mm-hmm. And they actually touch upon that in the anime, because his master, he did not willingly enter the Holy Grail War. He was doing, like, a blood ritual, kind of. Because he's a psycho. He is a sociopath.
Straight up serial killer.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, all of the things. He is the most despicable person in this whole show. I would say more than Castor. As presented.
Huh.
Really?
I wouldn't want to weigh in on that either way.
I mean, well, like, okay, they murder children.
Yeah,
and
they do.
They're excited about it. Not in that way, but, like, they're... yeah, I know.
They treat murder as, like, an
in
art
reality, the Bluebeard did,
Yeah, he did kill children.
Well, yes, and he was excited about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that. Yeah.
No.
So yeah, he's just doing a blood ritual type thing, and Castor gets summoned, and they go around killing children, killing all these other people.
Yeah. And
they have a conversation at one point where Bluebeard says something about not believing in God, and his master's like, "What? You don't believe in God? Like, what's wrong with you?" And, like, they have like a 10-15 minute conversation. And, okay, it's probably not that long, but it's a really good conversation where the crazy serial killer sociopath master is like, I believe in God. Like, we enjoy this and we're allowed to do this. Like, he has to exist. And Bluebeard is like, what are you talking about? Like, it was an incredibly interesting conversation.
Given the people having the conversation.
Exactly. Like, it was crazy.
So yeah, I'm quickly looking it up in case I forgot one, because there's...
You have.
Assassin.
Berserker.
Oh, Berserker.
Was Lancelot, which was amazing. Berserker was super interesting to me, especially the first time I watched it, not knowing who he was. One of my favorite scenes is when he jumps on that jet, and anything Berserker or at least anything this Berserker touches becomes his noble phantasm. So this jet changes into his coloring for when he's touching a weapon. So you realize instantly, like, oh my gosh, that's his noble phantasm now. Like, if he flies this jet into you, you're probably gonna die. Like, yeah, you were probably already gonna die because it's a jet, but now it's also his noble phantasm. And he's absolutely insane, because that's what Berserker is. It's supposed to be the strongest of all of the servants.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, that's how they speak about it, is Berserker, if given the opportunity, could kill all of the other servants.
Generally, yeah. That's
why they usually have to team up to take them out. And it's so interesting, especially, and then you learn, like, oh, it's Lancelot, and Lancelot was in love with Arthur, or Arturia, whatever. Well, he was in love with Guinevere.
There you go, yeah.
They
don't even go into
had a thing, and it didn't work out, and then Arthur died, and he went cray-cray, and that's why he could be a Berserker.
Yeah. And for the record, like, I'm just going to throw this out there. Fate Zero and the follow-up Blade Works, I think, are some of the best stuff that happens in Fate, because it's not completely off the rails yet, but the more you get into this, the more weird stuff that happens, and I definitely don't think the quality keeps up. So, referring to certain things related to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about
No, we're not. It's dumb.
They are not safe to talk about.
Yeah, that too.
But there's also one other servant, and it was one of the ones I thought was the most interesting, and I was really disappointed we didn't get more from. Yeah. Assassin. Assassin for this is Hassani Sabah, which, at the start, there's one assassin that you see, and Gilgamesh kills it immediately when it tries to infiltrate their, like, castle thing. And so they're like, oh no, assassin's dead! And so his master goes to the church to seek refuge. And then a ton of assassins start popping up throughout the entire church. So that's when you're like, oh, assassin is an army here. And one of the characters, it wasn't made completely clear, but at one point Waver is just like, oh, there's a different body for every single one of his personalities. Which I thought that's what Waver says.
No, I know.
It may not be true, but the idea is that it's still just like, it's not one person. It's a ton of people. And I mean, they take him out right after the alcohol party, which was so disappointing to me, because I was like, there's a ton of him. I want to see an all-out, brutal battle fight between all these guys. But what happens is Alexander the Great uses his noble phantasm to just crush them in like a minute.
There's like 30 assassins versus 300 troops.
More than 30, wasn't it? I don't know. Like,
it's not a fair fight. That's the key point.
Yeah, like the assassins literally just stand there, frozen, and they get killed. They get mowed down. Probably because they're smart enough to realize, like, oh, this isn't gonna work.
It's like 30 to 1 odds. Yeah, maybe worse. So yeah, and so the interesting thing about this is that we haven't even talked about who are technically the two main characters, which is
Arthur.
No, Kiritsugu, thank you, and Kirei. So I'm not going to go super into detail on them, because while they're interesting, it's hard to talk about why they're interesting, and some people may not find them interesting. I know Liz doesn't love them as much. But the quick...
No, I like them. I don't like Arthur.
Fair enough. Okay. So the idea here is one of the characters is... Well, actually, yeah, let's just talk about the mages. So Kirutsugu is Saber's master, sort of, kind of, yes, no. And he is special because the idea is rather than getting a mage, they hired a mage assassin.
Yep.
So this is your basically protagonist, and he's supposed to be kind of an anti-hero, and that it's not completely clear that he's a great guy. It's more that he's kind of a horrible guy who finally realized one day, like, I don't want to be horrible anymore, and that's why he's fighting. But because he's that kind of horrible guy, like, he's willing to do things that the mages would never think of, like blow up buildings and shoot people. Like, oh, I cast fireball, I cast gun. Like,
Yeah, they talk about the fact that he once blew up an entire airplane in order to kill one target.
Which you later find out there's more nuance to that.
Oh, yes, but...
Yeah,
he's that kind of person. He's willing to kill anybody to save the greater good.
Yeah, and so there's a big thing on that, and the other side of that coin is Kirei, who is supposed to be the moderator. The church moderates, or actually I think his father's supposed to be the moderator, right? I don't know, I can't remember, one of the two. But the church...
His father's the boss, because Kirei is the one who has an assassin.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So the idea is, Kirei is just this priest who's always been the perfect priest, and he's learned all this crazy magic, and he's always been an incredibly accomplished individual, but nobody really understands him, and he's always been a little bit weird. And the whole point is that he's basically a sadist, but he spent his whole life suppressing it. So he doesn't feel joy, he doesn't feel happiness, because the things that make him feel joy, and this is much more clear if you actually play the game, read the books, whatever, are not, like, he's been part of the church, and granted, he's been an assassin for the church, so we're not talking like your standard church here.
Yeah, the second season calls him a great fake priest.
Yes.
And that's actually a great way to put it.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is that Gilgamesh takes a huge interest in Kirei, because Kirei doesn't understand being happy, because he's never been happy, because the things that make him happy are horrible. But he starts to explore that because Gilgamesh pushes him towards it, and he starts to wonder if Kiritsugu is just like him because, he too has done horrible things. Maybe he enjoys combat and violence and battle. And they portray this really quite well, I thought. He's a really interesting character, and he has some really great scenes, fight scenes. So yeah, it's just kind of not something I expected. He kind of talks about how his wife died and he didn't really feel anything. I think he later find out he killed his wife, and then his father dies and he regrets not being able to kill his father. But the thing that finally makes him realize what joy can be is the misery of somebody else's position. Because there's and I'm not even going to go into detail on this whole shebang, but there's the Mato family, the Berserker master, and the short version of this is
bugs.
Well, no. One of the characters is the uncle of these two girls, who are the daughters of another one of the mages that's going to be fighting, the master of Gilgamesh, actually. Mm-hmm. But he decides that because you can only pass on your magic to one girl, this other mage family has been in such decline that they adopt the other girl. And so they're going to make her ready to fight in the next war and basically sit this war out as their plan, or, half try. Well, I'm not going into detail, but the training is literally horrific.
Yeah, bugs, you guys.
Just
room of bugs. Yeah, that's all you need to know.
Way worse than it sounds. So
you don't see
but still really disgusting to even imply.
So they imply.
Yeah. No, they don't pretend. So
not at all.
Point is, this uncle goes, "You cannot do this to her. I will," and he had left the family. "I will save her." And the idea is that they're like, "You could never compete in the war. You're not even good enough to compete in the war." He goes, "I will let you use all your horrific bug magic on me," which is also terrible because they live and feed off of him, inside of him.
They destroy one of his eyeballs.
Yeah,
he
and
can't see out of it.
And he knows
he gets a permanent limp. It's bad.
And he knows this is going to kill him. It's not even remotely secret. And if I win the Grail, you let her go. And they're like, "Sure, but we're not stopping her training until you win." So that whole misery is what, Kirei, it makes him happy to, hear about this horrific situation. And again, to kind of give you an idea of what kind of thing you're getting into here, he does not win. This is all set up for the next season. Arguably, the priest or Kiritsugu wins. So, it's brutal. But he also is really cool, has some great scenes. And, again, it's a really good arc to kind of have him be there, this specter of vengeance with motivation and whatnot, and blah 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 blah. Let's see.
They had a really great fight that we haven't mentioned. The Master of Lancer and Kirei are both in a mansion, and so Lancer's master, I can't remember his name. Sorry.
Kiritsugu, not Kirei.
No, neither of these guys. It's the Master of Lancer.
Yes.
The blonde guy with...
Yeah, but isn't it Kiritsugu who fights him, not Kirei? Kirei's the priest.
Oh, yeah, Kiritsugu. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I can't get his name right, but yeah.
Kiritsugu. Kiritsugu? I need to see it.
Kiri Kiri.
Kiritsugu. Kiritsugu. Kiritsugu.
Kiritsugu.
Kiritsugu.
We tried.
So they're in a mansion, and Lancer's master has this, like, mercury-looking blob.
Mercury elemental.
Yeah, next to him, and it just follows him around. And it can spread out, it can do things, like it can create a big dome around him to protect him, and it can separate itself into, a gajillion pieces and go to different rooms and look for people. And eventually that's how he finds where Kiritsugu is. And they start fighting, and Kiritsugu pulls out some guns. So Lancer's master is like, yeah, you're funny. And he makes that dome around himself. And so Kiritsugu keeps shooting at it until his gun runs out of bullets. He drops it, he pulls out a different gun, aims, and he shoots right into the middle of the dome, and he ends up hitting the Lancer's master in, like, the shoulder, the chest or something. And so Lancer's master is just like, what? No, this thing is the perfect guard. That could not have happened. And it gets so cool from there. I'm not going to be able to talk about this anymore because we're at the end of the narration. So we're going to get to talk more about this in the next episode
of Dragon Ball Z.
And that is the end of For Heavenly Beast, the Heaven and Earth Design Day 12. Day 12. I got 6 hours and 49 minutes of footage. I want to continue, but it's getting really dark, and I'm really tired. The last book I just finished of Dresden, my favorite character died, so I had a mini breakdown, and my eyes are sore. And David's over here on the couch asleep, mocking me.
I'm mocking you if I'm asleep.
You're not asleep. You're pretending to be asleep.
I was asleep.
I know you were. You were snoring. Yeah, you were, honey. You're so cute. Are you trapped under the blankets? So yeah, another thing where my favorite character dies, the usual for me now. But yeah, my eyes are just, so I'm calling it a night. I mean, I'm so close to finishing page 2, like, just so close, but it's not happening today. I need to shower and go to bed. So, like, subscribe, share, comment, all that jazz. And I'll see you guys in the next video.